G'day and welcome to New England Today. My name is Richard Monk and welcome to episode 2. Today I'll be talking with Tara Toomey. Tara's based in Uralla and she came up with an idea a few years ago that has just turned into something fantastic. It's Seasons of New England. It's not only putting New England's name on the map as far as a business, but also our products are going out right across Australia. Tara will explain a little bit more about what they are and where they're going, but the entire Uralla community is behind this effort. It's an extraordinary story. So let's hear what Tara has to say. Tell me a bit about yourself. Where are you from? How did you get here?
Well, I was born in Newcastle, but we moved here when I was 7. My mum is a teacher and dad a builder, and the building industry collapsed in Newcastle effectively around that time, and mum could apply for teacher transfer, and they felt they would just start again somewhere else because it was just so hard for dad. He'd been contracting for people and it just hadn't, he didn't feel there was enough work continuing in Newcastle at that time. And so they applied and got a town called Uralla that they had never heard of. They looked it up. It was near Gunnedah where they first met, and dad had a farm. So dad's one of those people who can turn his hand to absolutely anything, whether you want him to build a bridge or a house or a cupboard, he can do that. So they knew that dad would be fine, and it was more getting mum into a transfer. So they came to Uralla, and I was 7, so 1983.
So 1983 to 2024 was a different environment. What did you see? What changes did you see?
Probably one of the big things for me as someone who I was at school in Uralla, then high school in Armidale, was just how the shops changed constantly. There were sometimes there were empty shops, but sometimes it never seemed to be any difficulty to find a place if you wanted to rent something. I suppose I always felt like there was always one vacant shop or more. I guess it was still the same welcoming town that it is now. I always felt that people were very welcoming of new people, and I know my family felt very welcomed when we moved. I think sport kind of went up and down a little maybe. I think I was really involved in tennis when I first moved. I know that wasn't such a big thing for a few years in the middle there, but it's back again now. So I think the sense of community is the same. I think there's an economic vibrance now, though, that I feel is stronger. I'm sure perhaps as a 7-year-old I wouldn't have had a clue what was economically vibrant. I do know mum loved going and trying to support restaurants that might open or cafes that might be there when we could, and so I was always really grateful for those dining experiences. But, yeah, it was a really special place to be as a kid, and I loved that we had a big backyard and I could save up and borrow a horse and have a horse in my backyard. That was mine, and that was really a huge dream when I left Newcastle. I left the beach, but I was really glad to have a horse.
Yeah. And that is quite a jump from the beach to the mountains, but I get that totally. I did the same sort of thing. So you decided somewhere along the line, let's move to Seasons of New England. You decided somewhere along the line to take that community into a whole new place. How did you come up with that concept, firstly, and how did you think the community would react to the idea?
Yeah, I think I was really mindful that great ideas are only good if they're in the right context.
Yes.
And the right space, and if it's done in a way that's respectful, I hope, of the community, and if the community are willing to collaborate, because if they're not, it really just doesn't work, particularly something like the Expo where we're really, when you run something like that, you're looking for community support to welcome the people that are coming to town too, in a very fundamental way. So for me, I had spent 5 years in Sydney, and I'd been at uni in Armidale. I'd been fortunate to spend a bit of time overseas, one with my parents on a teacher exchange in America, and one where I spent 3 months, started as an archaeological project work in Greece, and went around Europe a little bit as on the back of that, doing other things with that. So I had this always perspective that I should not just come back to Uralla. As much as I loved it, I knew it was easy. And And but to be honest, it's a really hard place to beat, and I say that very genuine. I've looked. It really is a hard place to beat. People here are really extraordinary, and when I came back, I really felt that I wanted to be self-employed. I didn't want to be employed. And although I was employed a little bit longer, because I didn't know what business should look like for me, I finally started a bed and breakfast. I built, with my beautiful dad, built a house and a 2-bedroom cottage on a 5-acre block on the edge of town, also with my then husband. I bought the block and we got married shortly after that, and we built the house together. And we realised that the travellers that were visiting us wanted more reasons to come back, and there weren't a lot. We were probably the 3rd bed and breakfast at the time. So that was 12 years ago, a bit more. And so we wanted to create reasons for people to come and visit. And we also felt, because just prior to starting the B&B, I'd also been running, as a bit of a sideline, a handmade food business in various iterations of doing that. And I had felt really aware that there were not many places that I could line up with other people who made things that they sell, but that I was often lining up next to people who had bought in product to sell. So there's a double skin in the game when you make it. It's just such a different equation. And to stand next to businesses who had bought something in, and the value proposition really to me was single layered. And sometimes, there's a value in it, but it's thinner than the triple value that you get when you are buying from someone who's made it and also possibly sourced most of their ingredients locally as well and supported other local businesses. So that deeply layered social value had a deep economic value, and I couldn't compete with people who bought without any of those other layers. So we really felt that created an opportunity for an event that celebrated those people. So we came at it very much from personal experience, and we started the expo purely on that concept. If you live in the New England, we felt that was enough of a reason to visit, and there was a bigger scope for interest for travellers. Then you could come to Uralla, because Uralla really is not only an amazing community, it's beautiful heritage streetscape. It's very central in the New England. The crossroads east and west and north and south, and the train line to Uralla, I felt, and the airport is as close to the centre of Uralla as it is to the centre of Armidale. We were perfectly situated when I considered all of those things for travellers. So there was a no-brainer to me that it would happen here. But we wanted to do it and make it clear that if you made what you sell, then that's the product we want to showcase, and we want you as the character who makes it to be a big part of that story. So it was as much about product as it was about people and storytelling.
The storytelling bit we'll dig into in just a minute, because I'm fascinated by that. But can we just talk about the product for a minute? Where I'm looking around your store at the moment, and I've looked at a lot of the products. It's really diverse. So you have to be able to have a network of people who are going to supply this incredibly diverse, these diverse products. How do you do that? How do you set that up and maintain quality?
Yeah, I was really reluctant to enter the retail space of this concept, and it took us a long time to do that. We really only started formally in 2019.
Just in time for COVID.
Just in time. But I'd been doing farmers markets before I started the expo. So I knew there was a lot out there, but I also knew they were quite lost. Once you pack up at 12 o'clock, how do people... It was always quite hard, and I was one of those people. I was a baking, confectionery making person mostly by the end of that time, and I was lost. I managed to get into a couple of fruit markets and things, and I would sell a couple of times a week there, and that was how I survived. But it was a really tough space, and I knew that there was scope for me to scale, but I couldn't find the outlets, and I was lost in the landscape. So I knew already there were a lot of good people around. So when we did the first expo in 2014, my goal was at least 35, I think, stalls, businesses, and if I could get 500 people. And we were blown away. We had 50-something stalls in the end, I think 54, and people were still hoping they could sign on at the last minute, and I physically couldn't manage any more on the morning of. But and we had 3,200 people through the gate through that first event. It was just extraordinary response. People did want to find us, and they didn't know how. And I realised that we could meet that need with a concept that because what we also did was we built a website, or I built a website, and I made sure there was a 12-month link to the people all year, and we hosted that as part of so that when we say we had a stall fee, it was an annual partnership, a friendship fee even. So once we had done that for a few years, we had done hampers from the very beginning in small ways to try and offset the cost of running the expo. But by 2019, the government was doing a bi-regional campaign, and we were asked, would we do something for the New England? And so we did it as part of that. And that's when that's when we packed 2,500 hampers in about 12 weeks to go to Sydney.
That's extraordinary, and that's where the community came in too.
It was.
How did you get how did you spread the word, and what did you say? Because you've got, from my gatherings, everyone from retirement age through to kids at school and across the board, so everyone jumped in.
They did. And that's Uralla. It's just Uralla to a T. They do. They see the opportunity not just for themselves but for everybody, and they go, well, we want to make sure this happens. Our community will benefit, so we're going to get involved. And it's just how Uralla is, I find. From the very beginning when we started with the expo, people would turn up in the middle of the night, like the afternoon, as we're struggling to build marquees on our own, and they just help us for a few hours. So from the expo on, we've always had that support really very generously from the community to help us make the event the best we could. And therefore, when it came to packing those hampers, I have grown up here, and I do try very hard to be aware of who's needing something, or maybe not-for-profit groups that are needing some fundraising. And also, I went to Uralla Central. My mum was a teacher. My brother went there. So I know people, but at the same time, I've been better at working out how to connect and say, would this be something that would interest you? We've always paid people a donation, not expected freebies. Although we're very much, I guess, a social enterprise in the way we have to go about it, our margins are very small. We respect the time of everyone involved so that it makes a living for everyone that way. It does help, we have a huge volunteering community in Uralla. So when we say Uralla Can Assist or McCrosson's Mill, would you be interested in doing this? We would make a donation equivalent to the hours spent or whatever you feel is okay with you. That's how we've tended to run things. In the early days, we didn't have much. We couldn't actually do an hourly rate. So we made a donation and said, is that okay? If it's, and try, and if it wasn't, we literally just waited till we had more income from other sources, from our B&B or the confectionery, and then we paid more that way. But we knew that it was a good concept, that it was worth backing, but it would just take some time to build. And when you get one day a year, it's hard to try all the ideas in one day sometimes.
Just as a personal thing, do you believe in karma by any chance?
I don't know.
Doing good.
I hope so.
Doing good to get to, and because what you do is coming from the heart, and you're putting your own resources into that to make it happen. That's an extraordinary gamble for a lot of people, and particularly on the planet at the moment, where it's just sort of driven by blind greed. To hear something like that is extraordinary, and to know a community has bought into that as well is even more extraordinary.
Well, I think that is the lesson you learn in the town. I think people are pretty good, and when you grow up here, you can't. People know. My son and daughter know now. If they are doing something they shouldn't be, I'll hear about it. And I'm glad to say it doesn't happen often, but and don't repeat this, but maybe I shouldn't have said that, but my son is notorious for having saved the change from going to the tuck shop at school, and then he'll go and buy junk food at Foodworks, and one of my mates at Foodworks, I'm like, thanks, sort him out when he gets home. That's what I'm talking about. But I grew up here. I worked at lots of great places. One of my favourite places to work was the Top Pub, and that's just the most wonderful place to learn about people and to really appreciate.
Great training in retail.
It's just, and Matt and Lee Campbell and Ron Crippen were the best.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And,
So what's your the perimeter, are you just the Uralla Shire for your produce? Where's the farthest you pull it from?
Yeah, so we very early on realised we had to draw our own map because there are about 14,000 different iterations of the New England, and we certainly aren't aligned to the political maps because that changes every other day anyway. So we drew the map we felt from Tenterfield to Tamworth and Inverell to Dorrigo. So we stay sort of largely on the escarpment but down to Tamworth. But Dorrigo, and we sometimes go a little bit down. There's a couple of people down in the hinterland there, and out to Inverell. But that's the map we draw. We try and be fairly firm on the boundary, but at the same time, if there's someone who makes something extraordinary that has kind of moved around the boundary a little bit, we're very flexible at including them and supporting and showcasing their business too. And some people fit at the expo, some people fit in the retail space. Some people fit only in hampers. Yeah. So we try and meet people where they're at. And overall, there'd be around 180 businesses now that we work with across those three options.
Wow.
75 in here and around 105 at the expo. And then there's a couple more that are just, in the other space.
So can we just come back to the quality control? Because from all reports, it's very high quality stuff.
Yeah.
And you've obviously set the bar to a certain level. How do you prevent those who are not so good at producing stuff wanting to be in the mix when you can't tell them your stuff's rubbish? But
no.
How do you do that?
I haven't met anybody whose stuff is rubbish.
Wrong word, I guess.
Well, I haven't met anyone whose stuff isn't of the right quality. I think when people are prepared to say this is ready for sale, they've done quite a lot of work to get to that point. I know for me with food, I'm really paranoid about everything that goes out. It could be the last thing I ever sell if it's awful. I will not, So I know from my own experience, before you say I'm ready to sell this, you've done a lot of work. When you're talking about a handmade craft like a weaving or a screen printed product right through to food, or someone who's put the energy into roasting coffee, they're all things that have taken a lot of time to get ready for sale. So sometimes when people are just starting out though, the expo is a great spot because they can get that feedback direct to them. I really love this, or everyone's walking past, what's wrong, what's happening for me? So sometimes there's just that feedback that you need from customers direct before you're ready for a wholesale retail concept like we are, or before you're ready for hampers, because you might be able to scale sufficiently for our hopeful orders every year. So it's not so much about not including people. I try very hard, and I think we genuinely I don't know that we've really ever turned anyone away. It's more that we've said maybe not this part of the business, but maybe that part might be the way to start. And that's because I needed that feedback when I was doing this.
That's
to
great.
know where to start.
So you've almost created a tier, a career path, as it were, for people who are starting. So there's a start point as well. So you're always going to be looking for new people to be able to.
Yep, there's no limit. There is now I feel the one thing I love about the retail and hamper concept, once hamper started before the physical retail and the online was in the middle really, and that's really growing. But I feel that we've kind of worked into a space that there's a point everywhere that we can support people. I try not to, look, one thing I do try not to do is not to overlap with physical product in here that is around the corner at Little Birdie. Of
course.
That's a bit of a rule. Like if the butcher's got that honey, then we don't. That's definitely a rule we have because there's enough to go around. And there are, as you say, so many amazing producers. So we sometimes will choose a different section of their product range, or sometimes they have their whole range somewhere else, and that's fine too. So, but they'll be in our directory, which is available all year round, and they come to our expo. So if they're not here, we try and meet them somewhere else.
Of course. All right, I want to talk a little bit about, I do want to ask you about the future in just a moment, but you've told me about some incredible successes, the collaborative nature of this community and how you run a business that is about other people as well as yourself. Have there been any rough periods where you thought, oh my God, this is probably not going to go anymore? Have you hit that? Did you hit that place at any time? And please, if you're not comfortable talking
No,
about it.
look, there was one moment where I was at the gate of the expo at 5 a.m. waiting for people to come in. I think it was 23, and it was, the weather was a little bit on the side of that sort of not ideal that I would like. And I remember calling my husband and saying, I just don't think I can do this anymore. This has to be the last one, okay? He went, I've been waiting for you to say that. But you get through that.
Okay, so that's
okay.
you
That was a
obviously
particularly dark moment.
you obviously have a very half glass full attitude towards this. Otherwise, you probably would never have made it.
Absolutely, and I think that I actually think you have to have that in retail anyway. You have to be. It might look half full, but I'm going to call it 3/4 because I'm going to make it 3/4 by the end of the week because that's how it has to be.
So now, how far do you export?
Look, only into Australia, only across Australia. We don't.
Oh,
go,
sorry.
We don't go overseas.
The word shouldn't have been export, but it's not import either. It's just distribute to around Australia. How far do you distribute?
We go every state and territory we've post to on a regular basis. Yeah. Our online store goes everywhere, and the hamper deliveries, they have gone over to Perth, South Australia, I think to Northern Territory too, actually. Certainly all along on the eastern states, but we mostly do a big hamper delivery down to Sydney every year, and we have done a couple up north into Queensland, Southport, Brisbane.
So it is a very it's diverse, but it's a very specialised product. All the hampers themselves, and all the products around this. Well, I'm looking at right now, and obviously during the major events, it probably expands a little. But that sort of having something that specific, can you see it expanding beyond what you're doing now? Is that something in your mind?
There's absolutely room for growth for more hampers, for more product. The people we work with, I'm really aware of who has capacity to scale more and who needs more notice. I know all that, and we work with that all the time and say, look, by the end of November, can I get 100 of these? And that's what they need. But sometimes, and I'll take a gamble on that working in something because I know if it doesn't go in a hamper, it'll go in the shop or it'll go online. So we are really happy to back people in because once they work out how to make 100 of something in 3 months, sometimes they'll say, I actually could do that in 6 weeks next time if you needed it. And that's how we've actually worked people's scale capacity, and then now we know every year where we're at. So there's absolutely huge capacity for growth.
The model you've created too is transferable.
Yes.
Is that something in your mind as well?
To other regions? Yeah, absolutely. I think it's best done by people in the region. So I'm always really happy to talk with people who come in and say, look, I'm actually from Southeast Queensland. Someone came to talk to me about the concept and what we do and how we do it, and we had a good chat about all the things. So we do that all the time. I think it is. Once you get your freight networks internally down pat and you understand how you're going to freight things from your location, which is always a bit unique. Every region has its own challenges. So from here to everywhere is a little bit different. Then that's the fundamentals to then doing it somewhere else, really. Yeah.
Yeah. Because there are communities that could benefit greatly from this model.
I think so. I'd like to think that this has encouraged some more artisan businesses to sort of get up and running and to feel that they've got an outlet and a way to be discovered. So I hope that there's just that little bit of an opportunity. People think, well, there is a place I could sell something. There is a place I could, at least even at the expo, get a bit of an idea about whether I'm on the right track with my product. Particularly when a lot of the product in here, well, not a lot, but a certain amount really does rely on our agricultural industry. So there's an investment in that layer as well, whether it's the lavender farm or it's the honey based products or different things. Yeah. Yep.
So you can see a future, which is great.
Yes, definitely.
The community is on board, which is brilliant. There's growth ahead. Did you see this when you're sitting at the very front of this at the very beginning? Did you think you would be where you are now?
Gosh, no, not at all. I did literally do this in the middle of the night in between breastfeeding my second child. So that was literally where it started, because I needed an outlet for my product, and I needed to work out a solution on the tourism challenges and people's constant requests to have a reason to return because they loved our community. So really I was just always hoping I didn't go bankrupt running the expo. It was always, and for a while there we had a small contingency that was just, and almost a small understanding with our bank that if we're late with the home loan, just give us a minute. So that was where our start was very much just trying to make sure that expo day was viable and sustainable, because we felt it had to have good legs. It just seemed like it must work. It was a matter of working out how.
So clearly there's no plan to return to Newcastle.
I love Newcastle. I do love going back to the beach, but just for holidays. My brother lives there, so I do go. I do get my Newcastle fix. But that was a long time ago.
Is there anything you'd like to say as a message to people who, because this is obviously going out to quite a broad audience, and maybe some communities that can see what you've done? Is there anything you'd like to say to them that would inspire them to get on and try something like this?
I think understanding what the need is in your community, because it may not be this model, this product-based concept. It may be something else. We needed events, and we needed somewhere for our artisan producers to be found. That may not be what every community needs, though. So I think it's about understanding what the need is in your own space, and then, being willing to problem solve and have some skin in the game about how you solve the problem. It's not always the most obvious solution. I do remember when we started the expo, so many people said there won't be enough interesting businesses and no one will come. And I thought, you may be right, but I'm going to give it a go once and see what happens. And I think that's the other thing, is be prepared to give something a go once. Have some safeguards in place around the risk as best you can, and understand what it is. If anyone thinks there's something I can help by talking with them, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. No, that's fine. I always feel like your question at the end is the most important one almost, because it's about making sure that we all feel we can do the things we've been thinking, maybe I should try that.
Yes. Well, that's the remarkable Tara Toomey, the remarkable community of Uralla and Seasons of the New England that takes in more than Uralla, it takes in all of the New England. An extraordinary story, and that's only going to grow. Next week, I'll be talking to somebody who is taking the housing problem on from Armidale head on, and hopefully has some really nice solutions, but that'll be next week. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. That way we know that you're watching, and I know to keep producing these videos and with amazing people from around the New England. And if you have any ideas, by all means put it in the comments section below. But the most important thing at this moment is subscribe. And if you'd like to read more stories like this, go to the New England Times, nettimes.com.au. Until next week, see you then.